Please, may I see you, sir? This is how Donald Trump described his interaction with Prime Minister Modi. And it's important because in geopolitics, language is power. And I'll tell you why. It's not a memoir by a retired head of state recounting an old conversation. This is not a diplomatic cable which is private to a government. This is a head of state on a public stage at a retreat in front of American lawmakers. And this one sentence tells us far more about the current state of Indo US relations than any carefully drafted joint statement can. So, we're going to take a look at what this actually means for Indo US relationships in this video. So, remember, like, share, and subscribe. Let me give you some context. Now, when Donald Trump returned to the White House at the start of 2025, the mood in India was upbeat. He was seen as a friend of India. In fact, his chemistry with Narendra Modi, their personal chemistry, was celebrated in Indian media. You remember Houston and Ahmedabad. In February last year, Prime Minister Modi was among the first international leaders to meet with Trump, just hours after he signed his plan introducing reciprocal tariffs. The optics were powerful. They had actually vowed to double bilateral trade to $500 billion, big number by 2030, and also conclude a mutually beneficial trade deal soon. At that point, it seemed like the two countries were aligned. Let's take a reality check to a year later to see what has happened. Now, 1 year has passed. The trade deal has not materialized. Minister Piyush Goyal and his team have been negotiating for a year, and we don't know what that status of that deal is. India remains the highest tariffed country in the world in doing business with the US. There's a 50% tariff in place, but a 25% explicitly linked to India's purchase of Russian oil. And Trump has made it clear this is not an accident. This is pressure. He has repeatedly said he's using trade as leverage in conversations about national security. He has repeatedly told his domestic gallery that India is unhappy and he's getting his way. In fact, at that same GOP retreat where he made that statement, he actually said Modi is not happy with me because they're paying a lot of tariffs right now, but they've reduced it significantly from Russia, saying that India has reduced the oil it's buying from Russia, whereas New Delhi has denied that any such conversation has taken place or that the Prime Minister has made any commitment of reducing Russian oil at all from India. Trump, though, keeps repeating that claim publicly, linking it to tariff. And that matters because this is no longer quiet diplomacy, this is public coercion. That language shift is really important. So, that sentence, let's come back to that sentence that we were talking about. Sir, may I see you, please? It's not etiquette, it's not about respect, it's not about framing, it's about how Trump is using words to frame world leaders. He constantly makes it seem like world leaders are people who are trying to please him, who are trying to meet him, who are asking, who are bending. He's done this with allies, he's done this with adversaries, and now he's doing it with India. Because Trump, as a former reality TV star, knows storytelling is strategy, right? So, what he's done in this one sentence is that he's made an entire country sound dependent. He has strengthened his own position, and without signing a single piece of paper, he's actually completely tilted the conversation in his favor. I want to take a side detour here to just examine why this feels so cringe and so unusual to us when we're listening to it. And to understand why it feels so jarring, we have to understand why and how international diplomacy works. Now, normally at the highest level, diplomacy has three unwritten rules. What is equality of status? When the heads of two governments or countries meet, irrespective if one country is poorer or is weaker in any way, the two of them meet in public as equals. So the US president does not speak about the Indian prime minister as someone seeking permission, just like India does not speak about American presidents in that way. The second rule is that all disagreements stay private. So even trade disputes, defense delays, oil purchases, these are discussed behind closed doors. And public statements are very neutral. That's always how it's been. Third, the language is always very calibrated. Every word is chosen, every statement is drafted because there's never a loss of face. If you lose face, you lose leverage. And I remember as journalists, we used to always feel like joint statements that come out of these meetings are really boring. But they're boring on purpose. They're boring for a reason. They're designed to offend no one. They're designed to maintain the relationship thus far and to make sure that future conversations are not in any way harmed by that statement that you're putting out. Trump has thrown all these rules out of the window. And he is obviously, his entire government has made it repeatedly clear that they don't care about the way things are done, because these are not written laws. In fact, they don't care a fig about written laws either. As long as they can do it, they will do it. In fact, Stephen Miller of the Trump administration, speaking to the US media in the last 24 hours about Venezuela, actually turned around and said that this idea diplomatically, internationally, that America has to go around the world being the good guy, asking for elections to be held, is no longer something they prescribe to. They just believe that whatever needs to be done, if they can do it, they will do it right away. So Trump has, as we've seen in the last year, he negotiates in public, not in private. He personalizes state relationships. He uses language to establish hierarchy and not partnership. So when Trump says they want to make me happy, or when they say, "Sir, may I see you, please?" what he's doing is extremely unusual and jarring. He is narrating the conversation he has had with another leader of a sovereign country as a petitioner. Now, this is not normal diplomacy. This is performative power. And it's particularly glaring when it comes to India, and I'll tell you why. Because India's foreign policy has always rested on strategic autonomy, which means that we do not depend on anyone, we do not listen to anyone, and we are autonomous in every way. So India doesn't like to be seen as a junior ally of any country, as a dependent partner of any country, or as part of anyone's camp. We've avoided military alliances. We've resisted pressure from the Soviet Union, from the US, from China during the Cold War. This is how we've been from independence. This is who we are. So when the President of the United States publicly frames India's Prime Minister as someone who is asking and pleading, it cuts against decades of India's diplomatic posture. And for India, optics matter not just for what it means, domestically, and I'll come back to that, but also because of what it signals to our neighbors and our strength in front of our neighbors, to our independence to our rivals, and also stability to our other partners. Now, there was a domestic cost, because automatically we'll know that Mallikarjun Kharge of the Congress turned around and said, this sounds like a Mugembo conversation, that India is trying to make Mugembo Kush, and this is not good for our country. So Trump has given ammunition to the opposition. He's forced the government into silence. It creates a perception problem also for the BJP as a political party. Remember the idea that India is a Vishwaguru, that the Prime Minister is respected across the world, and as a result, all Indians are respected, and our passport has more clout. All of this comes under a cloud when Trump speaks like this about our Prime Minister, and thereby speaks like this about all of us. So it would be easy to, dismiss this and say, oh, this is just Trump. He's just a rude guy. He's a schoolyard bully. But that would miss the point. And I think it's a massive mistake to dismiss Trump as someone who just speaks off the top of his head, because he's using language as leverage. And by speaking this way publicly, he's signaling his own toughness to his voter base. He's pressuring India without any formal escalation, and he's keeping the upper hand in negotiations. I believe it's all part of strategy. The danger is that Trump is rude, but that's not the only danger. The danger is that he's normalizing this language now about, when it comes to diplomacy. It weakens diplomacy, it forces countries to reciprocate emotionally, and it makes compromises even harder. There's another interesting story that has come up at the same time when it comes to Indo-US relations. Now, we've now found out that the Indian embassy in Washington hired an American lobbying firm to set up meetings and phone calls between Indian officials and Trump's officials after that 50% tariff was imposed last year. Now, what happens in the US is that they have lobbyists legally who work with their government to get things done. So corporates hire lobbyists, apparently other countries hire lobbyists. These lobbyists have to declare at the end of the year all the work that they have done. There's one company called SHW Partners that submitted details to the US Department of Justice. These filings have mentioned assistance that they have given to the Indian embassy between April and December last year, including arranging meetings, phone calls, and emails between Indian officials and US officials, including our Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar. And that has raised some questions. There's one report that says that this company was paid $1.8 million. That's nearly 15 crore rupees by India to do this lobbying work for us. More eyebrows being raised. And it says that basically, and this is a whole list of all of the work that has been done, has been made public, including, reaching out to White House Chief of Staff, to trade representatives, and to the National Security Council On the 10th of May, that was the day that was during Operation Sindoor apparently, and in the details it says to discuss media coverage of Operation Sindoor. Now, the government says that our government says it's standard practice to use a lobbyist, but it does signal strain between the two countries. And I'll tell you why. Because our External Affairs Minister, Mr. Jaishankar, used to be India's ambassador to the US. He has been working this relationship since the Obama days, and even before that. He has tremendous, experience. He has his own contacts, he has his own inroads. Why does he need a lobbying firm to place his appointments? Does that mean that his relationship is now also strained? Why are the calls being made? Apparently, every time our prime minister, and this is based on these details, every time our prime minister put out a tweet, there would be a lobbyist who would call their government and flag that tweet, saying, basically, look at the tweet that has been put out, and sort of establishing, and it also establishes that the lobbying firm was used during Operation Sindoor, where the role of the US is being at this point still sort of debated. What sort of role did this lobbying firm play? Did the US actually broker anything? So these findings are actually from the day of the ceasefire also, that this firm was engaged. And Suhasini Haidar of The Hindu has pointed out that basically this means one, that effort has not paid off, and those 15 crore rupees, whether or not that was the amount that was paid, might have been in vain. But it also basically it indicates that there is a strain between these two countries, and we're having to use a lobbyist to actually set up a phone call between their officials and our officials. India has responded, of course, as always, measured, institutional, deliberately unemotional. We've not reacted to many of the things that Trump has said in the last year. We've not reacted to what he has said last night either. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? One, India's refusing to personalize the relationship, I would say, is a very good thing, because India is choosing not to play that game, not responding to his remarks in kind, avoiding any sort of public rebuttals, keeping engagement as official and diplomatic as possible. We're denying Trump the confrontation that he actually seeks. We're refusing to play by his rules. Now, pushback could have felt satisfying at this point, but it often basically strengthens or calcifies that position. So India has actually been quiet. We've kept trade negotiations alive in the back rooms. We've prevented tariffs from becoming a political standoff, and we're betting on the process actually paying off in the long term. Also, remember, in the long game, Trump's presidency, however disruptive it may be, is time bound. It will last for a certain number of years. We're aware of that. And India's interests are not time bound. Our interest will outlast Trump's presidency. And so, by not responding, what India is doing is maintaining status quo on our end as well, so that it does look like only this individual has a problem and not the entire relationship. This matters particularly in our conversations with the EU, with Gulf countries, with South Asian countries, and all of our long-term investors. India is protecting its strategic autonomy. We have not committed that we're going to stop buying Russian oil. We have not publicly conceded any of those mediation claims. We have not altered our core foreign policy positions. But there is a trade-off, like I said. By keeping quiet and not responding to what Trump is saying, the trade-off is largely to our narrative. It exposes India to a massive narrative risk. To domestic audiences, it seems like our government is not able to handle this relationship as well. To our neighbors, we seem weaker. To our rivals, we actually seem like it's not a great look in front of our neighbors and our rivals. So yes, the Indian approach does have merits, to be calm where others are being erratic, but to be institutional as well when Donald Trump is making it personal, but that silence will actually come at a cost. So at this point in the world, remember, also if everything moves on social media, Trump knows how to actually generate that 30-second bite that will actually travel the furthest and travel completely out of context and establish his narrative before anything else. So the question that we're left with is, can India protect its strategic interests without allowing its standing to be publicly diminished in this manner? And can diplomats actually do the work that they have been doing for the last several decades and revive this situation in any way? Because it does seem that Donald Trump might have the upper hand in many, many ways. So if we need to see clarity and details of a trade deal as quickly as possible, we need to see India make inroads that are stronger when it comes to conversations with the West, whether that is EU or whether that is the US. And of course, we've seen India have conversations with Russia. There's China, of course, that's seeming interesting as well. Just yesterday, we saw India open up interesting new business visas for China. So India is playing this larger, wider game, but it's a tricky game to play. My personal instinct would be to trust our diplomats because they've been doing this for a very long time and they're very good at it. But to also slightly worry about the fact that Donald Trump has changed the rules of the game of diplomacy altogether. So, can our diplomats quickly learn how to navigate a new world which seems to be run by Donald Trump entirely? Leave me a comment in the comment section on where you believe India stands on the entire idea that we are a Vishwa Guru, that we are more respected, that our foreign policy and our diplomacy is actually much stronger than it was maybe 10, 15 years ago, depending on the conversations we are now hearing from Donald Trump.